Hello and welcome, star people. This is APM, your intrepid star guide and cosmic detective, and this is another episode of the Outlaw Astrology podcast. This is episode 155, and in today's episode we're going to go beyond the Golden Dawn series, where we continue questioning inherited systems, thinking dangerously, and building tarot astrology correspondences that serve our contemporary practice. And so, what we're going to be doing today is revising the Empress, the Emperor, and the Hierophant through a critical lens. So we're going to examine the Golden Dawn assignments, explore alternatives that reclaim sovereignty, question patriarchy, and reimagine authority for modern practitioners. But first, a little housekeeping. This episode builds on episode 154 and 153's methodology, so we're not just learning correspondences, we're learning how to think like intellectual outlaw mystics who honor lineage but refuse dogma. Oh, and before we move on, we have a social media presence. Wow, that sounds really sexy, doesn't it? Anyway, we're on Pinterest, YouTube, and Instagram. You can find those links in the show notes. There is a free and paid version of this newsletter. You'll find that link in the show notes as well. And if you prefer to read these episodes, they are available for free for the time being. And if you'd be so kind as to like, share, and subscribe, and also review the podcast, give us 5 stars so other astro-curious people who would benefit from this knowledge can find us as well. And with that said, notes, all of this is in the show notes and onward. Wow, that is a lot to tell you. Anyway, moving on, the Empress, and here that's what we're going to start with, the Empress. And it's going to be Venus or a sovereign matrix or creatrix. Ooh, okay. I like it. I'm feeling it. I'm resonating. Alrighty, let's move on. Alright, so review the Golden Dawn assignment. Let's do that. So the Empress is Venus, love, beauty, fertility, sensuality, attraction, and harmony. And there is a resonance, absolutely. The Empress is the embodiment of beauty, pleasure, creative abundance, magnetic force. Venus captures most of this energy quite well, frankly. But let's complicate it a bit. Does Venus's association with romantic love, partnership, and being desired diminish the sovereignty of the Empress's creative power? Is she creating for another's gaze or from her own abundant source? Now, it can be a bit tricky, in my opinion, and here's why I consider it to be tricky. The Venus card usually depicts traditionally a pregnant feminine figure, which makes it harder for people who don't identify as femme to relate to the card. It might make someone like myself with that experience start to doubt and not have as much of a connection to the card. The tie to reproductivity is often seen when you see femme figures in mystical and spiritual spaces. It is always tying a woman's worth, a feminine person's worth, to their ability to reproduce other people. And I just feel that, in my opinion, for my practice, not what I'm looking for. Now, when I first started reading, it was not a problem. Why? Because that was a bit ago when I was a teenager. And I didn't know what mattered most to me at that point yet. I was still experimenting, exploring. That's a lifelong experience for me. But at that time, I didn't know myself as well. Didn't have the lived experience to back up any associations. Thereby, dealt with the ones as they were because I saw them as fixed and didn't know you could change them until much later. So, let's explore some alternatives. The moon as an alternative. So that's fertile cycles, motherhood, abundance, emotional abundance in particular, and the body's wisdom. I like emotional abundance, I like the body's wisdom, but I don't like tying the empress to fertile cycles. That fertile cycles had better be about creativity and a process of ebb and flow rather than fertility as is usually traditionally depicted. However, if you like the moon for this card, then run with it, explore it. How about Ceres Demeter? Now, Ceres Demeter is a minor planet in orbit between Mars and Jupiter. It is about 1/3 of the space, which is vast, by the way. It's huge. You can literally drive right through it without hitting a thing. And quite a few of the asteroids are there with it. That would be Pallas, Vesta are also situated here. So most of and Juno, etc., you'll find them here in this asteroid belt, which is the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. So it kind of gives you the kind of vibe. The way Chiron is a bridge between Jupiter and Saturn energies, depending on the time of the year. These planets, including Ceres, can be seen as bridges between Mars and Jupiter energy. And so Ceres is actually a minor planet. You're going to see it listed under asteroids, depending on the software. And it stands for agriculture or abundance, mother-daughter mysteries, grief and renewal. That's interesting. Or it could still be Venus, but emphasizing her ancient sovereignty as Inanna, Ishtar, warrior goddess, asexual autonomy, and descent and return. Now, when I see warrior goddess, sexual autonomy, and descent and return, I saw asexual autonomy. I don't know why I did, but I did. When I see this, I think Artemis, which is also an asteroid. So that's another choice. Now, for me, I'm using the sun for that, because I'm thinking if anybody needs conscious will, if anybody needs to feel like the need to focus on the self, because femmes in this particular Western society are always taught to consider everybody else's needs and feelings and wants, and then after everybody else is taken care of, one day magically they'll be able to take care of themselves. And so for my personal practice, the focus is taking away all this the sticky need, this, sticky and a little bit dirty need to take care of everything and everybody, and last, after all is done and said and taken care of, I can get to me. That doesn't work for me anymore. And so I've chosen the sun to work with this card. However, if you heard the moon and you liked it, Ceres if you liked it, or even Venus, but emphasizing more of the ancient sovereignty from previous lineages, feel free. Or you might look at Jupiter, the other great benefic, and say, what about cycles? What about ebb and flow? This could also apply. So your lived experience is the sole arbiter here. What resonates, also the sole arbiter. If what I've said interests, explore. If Pluto or Mars or Pallas or Juno or even Vesta or Eris, which is a minor planet right in the Kuiper belt, where Pluto is located. This is a minor planet out there, a little smaller than Pluto, but out there. If that resonates, then explore it. If the resonance is there, that's just a sign that stepping into it is a wise idea. So let's discuss the political dimension. And so what we're trying to do here is reclaim the Empress from passive fertility goddess, which is how the card always depicts the energy and how it's often explained in all of the little black books. And we want her to be an active creatrix. So she's not waiting to be impregnated by the emperor's ideas. She is the source of her own manifestations. She has her own ideas. Thank you very much. Okay? So that's why I've chosen the sun, because sovereignty. Okay? So let's explore. Let's experiment a little bit. So I would suggest working with the Empress as a lunar sovereignty, or Ceres is grief wisdom for a cycle, meaning a lunar cycle, and asking, does it deepen your relationship to creative power, to embodiment, to the fullness of authority, even if it presents a little feminine. Cool? Alrighty, let's move on to the Emperor. The Emperor, there we are, is Aries, or architecture of will. Let's review the Golden Dawn correspondence or assignment. So the Emperor equals Aries, cardinal fire, leadership, initiating force, warrior energy, assertion. Let's question that assignment. So, does Aries impulsive, martial, that's Mars energy, pioneering energy, fully capture the Emperor's structured authority, stable leadership, and architectural and archetypal thinking, or does it emphasize conquest over governance? Okay. Let's explore, shall we? Saturn is a good example here. Could be structure, discipline, authority, time, the further long-term vision. Juicy. Mars, we can still use Mars, directed will, protective force, strategic action. Capricorn, mastery, ambition, institutional power, and earned authority. Or the Sun, the sovereign self, conscious rulership, and radiant leadership. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Well, let's step into the shadow for a moment here. See, the Emperor is about patriarchal control. It's about rigid hierarchies and domination. It's also about tyranny. So, how do we reclaim this card's positive masculine qualities, or qualities that have been traditionally and historically attributed as masculine, protection, structure, integrity, whilst acknowledging its historical weaponization against feminine, queer, and marginalized bodies? So that's the question. Let's complicate it a little more. What if the Emperor isn't about gender at all, but about the capacity to create stable containers, honor commitments, and build lasting structures that are available to all, regardless of identity? What then? Okay. Now here's what I'm thinking about that. For me, I'm thinking, my belief is that this card, when it was assigned in a very kind of a haphazard, little bit messy way, because creativity is messy by nature. It is uncomfortable, messy, and hardly ever looks neat. It's clean, but it's not neat. Okay? And so when I was doing the questioning, I thought, well, first of all, yes, Aries is impulsive. It's Mars energy. It has a pioneering energy. But I don't see it as a structured authority, Aries energy. I don't have the relationship that is a stable rulership. And I don't see it as leadership. I don't look to Aries energy as leadership. Just because something is first doesn't make it a leader, just means it was first, okay? The sun got here, first. It keeps us all alive and warm and keeps this planet spinning, but would I call that leadership? No, I wouldn't. So, I never bought that Aries energy is leadership energy. I believe it is pioneering energy, it is trailblazing energy, but leader, no. I look elsewhere for that type of energy. So, when I started doing the questioning, I went, no, that doesn't work for me. It never did. So whenever I see horns on or rams all over that card, I have to ignore them because I'm like, I'm not going to use these astrological associations, which is why I've made it a new practice not to buy decks that have that pre-done because I wish to do it myself. I prefer to think for myself, discover for myself, experiment and explore and come to my own conclusions without being told what to think. I like epistemic dignity, meaning I like to decide fairly, and I want the freedom to express myself and to think, and I want that to be received fairly. I extend that to everyone else. I think they should extend it to me, keeping in mind I probably It's possible I mispronounced that word, and I'm fine. My tongue is just doing what it does today, okay? But that being said, that's what got me started. And I thought, oh, Saturn structure, I did use that. It makes sense to me. I also used Capricorn, so Saturn's about structure, discipline, authority, etc. And Capricorn's mastery, ambition, and earned authority. To me, that made sense to me. And then I thought, yes, I also thought of the Sun, sovereign self, conscious rulership, radiant leadership, etc. I went all those ways, but where I went to eventually was the sign of Libra. Why? Because I like that cool-headedness, that harmonizing energy, that value-based Venus energy thrown in there, because without values, without harmonizing, without considering others and the impact of our actions, our decisions, our way of being in the world on others, especially if they are people that are close to us, I feel that Libra embodies that energy the best. However, you may think, well, what about Venus? Venus is also a good choice. I'm not against that energy at all. I'm going to consider that in the future. But right now I've gone with Libra because Libra is an air sign and I like the devil's advocate of it. I like the clear-headedness, its ability to harmonize, to see the point in both sides or all sides without feeling the need to take a side. And I feel that this energy is about fairness, inclusive, and equality, and I feel that the Emperor energy, which has traditionally been problematic, would be better harmonized with this energy, which is why I chose Libra. However, Saturn is, like I said, available, and there are other signs. Venus, I didn't choose Venus, but Venus is also a good choice. The sign of Taurus is a good choice. I think Earth would be a good choice for this card as well. I would also suggest air energy would be a choice because air is about thinking and we don't want it to be just doing and we don't want it to be martial. We want to have a little cool Venusian energy there, okay? So that's this thinking that I've mentioned is how I have oriented. So that's why I chose Libra and potentially might also use Venus, because I feel that historically this card is problematic for me, and for all the reasons of it being associated with traditionally male, Mars, conquering, dominating energy, and I feel I want to step away from that in my own mystical practice. Okay, so let's think about it a little deeper. Here's a question. What planetary energy best reflects your experience of healthy authority, of healthy structure, of healthy leadership? Test it in practice and notice what shifts. Okay? Now let's look at the Hierophant. Another interesting card. Taurus, or the Guardian of Mysteries. Ooh, I like the Guardian Mysteries type of energy. Yum, yum, yum. And so, let's break down that Golden Dawn assignment. The Hierophant equals Taurus. That's fixed earth, tradition, material stability, sensory wisdom, and an embodiment of values. So let's question this resonance. Does Taurus's earthy, sensual, material focus align with the Hierophant's role as a spiritual teacher, the keeper of sacred doctrine, and a mediator between divine and human realms? Or does it ground them too firmly in the physical? Let's explore some alternatives. Like Jupiter. And Jupiter is expansion, philosophy, teaching, higher learning, and moral authority. It's guru energy. Neptune, which is mysticism, spiritual transcendence, collective faith, and the numinous. Also sounds good. Sagittarius, the search for meaning, moral philosophy, the spiritual conquest, or Chiron, the wounded healer, teaching through lived experience and initiation through pain. Now, we're going to do something interesting. We're going to discuss the institution versus the mystic. Okay? So, the Hierophant traditionally is about orthodoxy. That is, organized belief systems and the traditions that underpin, support, and surround them most of the time. And so the question is the hierophant about organized religion and orthodox teaching, or about direct transmission of sacred knowledge? And so does your correspondence choose to reflect your relationship to spiritual authority? So that's the question. That's the question. And here's what I consider one of the challenges here. And we're going to get to that in a second. So let's step into the next question. Let's do a reframe. What if the hierophant represents not the teacher, but the threshold itself? What if it represents the liminal space where profane becomes sacred? What planetary energy governs that boundary? Now, here's what I was doing with this card. Here is the thing. See, I grew up as a person who went to a Christian-oriented school, and I cannot remember a single thing that they taught me because I literally realized just a day or two ago that I spent all of my time daydreaming throughout school. I literally did not listen to these classes where they taught me doctrines about Christianity because I found them boring and tedious, yawn-inducing in fact, and couldn't even focus on them. I couldn't get my nervous system to give a damn one way or the other, so to this day I don't remember a thing about it. And so when I'm interacting with this card, I see it as the guardian of mysteries rather than Taurus energy. Now, when I first learnt Tarot, I accepted Taurus as the card because I didn't know anything. And as I started to work with the Tarot and have my own experiences and compare them, it stopped being resonant to the Hierophant equal Taurus. And so I started questioning. I've done it for several times over a period of years, trying to find what works for me and feels more resonant. And currently I'm going with Scorpio energy. Why? Because Scorpio energy is about mysteries. It's about depth. It's about what is seen, what is not seen, what is in the darkness, what is in the shadow. It's about transformation, because that's what these systems are meant to do. They're meant to transform you. They're not meant to support you, yes, but to transform you, to alchemize. And if they're not doing that, I don't see the point. When it comes to Taurus energy, yes, I just don't feel that this card best embodies Taurus energy for me anymore, and which is why I have released it. And I'm looking at other options. I like Jupiter, I like Neptune, I like Sagittarius. The problem for me is that these are a little too on the nose for me, and I feel that Jupiter is already about philosophy, and I feel choosing this seemed a little too on the nose and too easy. It was like I wanted certainty so immediately, and Jupiter makes sense. Neptune makes sense. I'm going to keep as an option. Sagittarius is about ethical philosophy, to search for meaning. It makes sense to me, but it doesn't necessarily mean for me an orthodox religion or orthodoxy at all. Chiron, I've also used Chiron for this card. That makes sense, which is why it's still an option. But for me, Scorpio energy best embodies my current experience of the card, because I'm looking for the mysteries, I'm looking for the hidden, I'm looking for the secret, I'm looking for depth. I don't want simple, easy, quick answers. I want my whys and wherefores to be answered in a way that's resonant. And so here is a way to critically engage. So if you've experienced, say, for example, spiritual abuse, rigid dogma, or exclusion from religious spaces, how might reimagining the Hierophant's correspondence help reclaim this archetype for liberatory spiritual practices? Because that's what I'm absolutely about. I did not experience spiritual abuse as far as I know, but I did experience rigid dogma. Just turning up, oh, you need church. I'm like, for what reason? Do you think me going to church, staring up at the ceiling and daydreaming my way throughout the entire service and not listening to a single word beyond the music is going to change anything? It did not. It would not. And so that rigid dogma that I've had to experience has made me rethink this. I don't want my Hierophant to be rigid. I want it to be supportive. Rigidity does not necessarily mean security, it does not mean stability, and it does not read as safe. I'm trying to get away from rigidity, and Taurus energy, for me, at least for this card, tends in that direction. But I send it over to you. What do you think? Based on your lived experiences. As I've said, you're the only authority here, and your opinion is the only opinion that matters in your own spiritual practice. So if Taurus resonates, use it for the lunar cycle. However, if it doesn't, use this as your permission slip to explore, to ask questions. I don't see the hierophant this way, you might say. You're free to reshape, reform, and play with the images you see, regardless of what they look like on the card, but your association with it can change. Feel free to experiment and explore as needed for as many moon cycles as pleases you. Now, let's go into the practical application. So we're going to use this to start building our own system. So, first, there's a method. It's best to, I don't want to go over that again, but episode 154 has a method. Step 1, you're going to meditate with the card. We're going to do it very quickly. Step 1, meditate with the card. Step 2, research alternatives. Step 3, test and practice. And 4, document your findings. And so meditating, you might want to journal with that. You might want to ask questions of the card. That's called an active imagination exercise. Research alternatives, okay? What other cards come up for you? What other planetary, elemental, zodiacal alternatives pop out for you? Jot them down. Ask questions. Check your test and practice. That will be where you check your lived experience. Have you had a lived experience? What is it, and does it resonate with any of the alternatives or the current understanding of the card? Document your findings means you've looked at all of that and you're thinking, okay, what most resonates is the question here. Okay, so let's do a second layer here. Consider your positionality, and that basically means consider your gender, if you identify as having one, your culture, your spiritual background, your political values, your lived experience, your values, other values, your ethics, your principles, etc. And we want to look at, see how this shapes the correspondences that feel most alive and true. So this isn't about relativism, meaning it's relative to our experience or relative to us. It's embodied knowledge. What have you lived? What resonates when you look at these cards? So if you're looking at, like I said, the Hierophant, do you see this guy? Well, first of all, in my case, that he looks like the Pope to me. I could barely stay awake in a church that has a Pope. I literally daydreamed through all of that. So for me, no, it didn't work. I'm like, I don't resonate with him. But yet I've seen other cards that show him looking more Buddha-like, or I've even seen one where the Hierophant was extraterrestrial. I've seen it more secular looking, with a teacher talking to a child or talking to another person, and it shows them, oh, they're clearly the Hierophant, looking more modern. I don't resonate with the Rider-Waite-Smith view, because I'm like, I don't look at that and see it as a spiritual authority, which is how we got started in this. And so when I did it, I looked at that and I went, this image doesn't speak to me. It feels like a meh for me. So what do I need to do? What questions do I need to ask? Because this is where I started this protocol. Next, we want to discuss, we want to work with multiple correspondences. So here's the thing. You don't have to choose just one. The Empress can hold the Venus and the Moon. The Emperor can embody both Aries and Saturn, depending on the contest, depending on the querent and question. So maybe you're the sort of person that's like, you know what, I don't like this whole one thing. I don't want to have one. Maybe I want to have 2 or 3. Go for it. If you hear something here, or it inspires you to come up with a correspondence, and you feel 2 things, and you're like, I feel the moon, but I feel a little plutonic here. Run with that. Trust that. The whole point of making choices here, based on your own lived experience and your authority, is to trust that impulse that says, this interests me, and run for it. Run for it. Just experiment, explore, just go with it. That's a better way of saying that. Go with it. Okay? And so what we're looking for here, we're looking for integrity rather than just plain old rebellion. See, we're changing the correspondences not to be just a contrarian. It's about deepening our practices, deepening our connection, finding what's resonant, honoring our gnosis, which is knowledge, and building a system that actually works with lived experience, not against it. Not we have to bend ourselves and the way we live our lives and see ourselves and how we want to move through the world. It honors our lived experience. It honors our embodied selves. And that's what we're looking for here. And so, here's a general prompt. Which traditional correspondences feel the most limiting or misaligned in your spiritual practice? And what would happen if you changed it? Nothing is set in stone here. Question everything all the time. The best leaders were always heretics. Okay? And now we have come to the end of this particular episode. Thank you very much for listening. And here is our takeaway. Sovereignty, authority, and spiritual teaching. These archetypal forces are too complex, too alive, too politically charged to be contained by a single planetary, zodiacal, or elementary assignment made over a century ago. Your practice deepens when you think for yourself. So I invite you to choose one of these cards, Empress, Emperor, or Hierophant, and work with an alternative correspondence for the next lunar cycle. And that means your journal, how it shifts your readings, what resistance you encountered, what resonance arose, and whether it serves your practice more truthfully, more honestly. Does it resonate? Does it embody more? That's what you're looking for. Now, the next episode we're going to be talking about, it's going to be 156. We're going to talk about the Lovers, the Chariot, and Strength, and that's desire, will, and power, reimagined through contemporary astrological lenses. And with that said, we meaning me and the Outlaw Astrology podcast. You can find it on Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube. There is a free and paid version of the newsletter. These podcast episodes are available for free if you just rather read them rather than just listen to them. And thank you very much for listening, and if you'd be so kind as to like, share, subscribe, and review, give us 5 stars so that other astro-curious people can find us, it would be much appreciated. And with that said, thank you very much for listening. Peace and astro magic. Until next time.